Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Luna Arcana's podcast, Letters from Luna, YouTube podcast. I'm Rohini Walker, and I am one of the co-creators of Luna Arcana. I'm also a writer, coach, mentor, and I am here today talking to a really special person, Heather Hawkes, whom I met last year here in Joshua Tree at a retreat at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center that was being run by a mutual friend of ours. And we met there and we just hit it off immediately. We had a lot of just loads in common, lots of just two people who meet and are just immediately like, yes, we could just talk for hours. And so I'm just really excited to have Heather on today. Heather is she's a classically trained homeopath, and she lives in here in Southern California in Temecula. And she is also a transformational coach, a public speaker and author, as well as a mother and a minister for Soulwakening, which we'll talk more about during this conversation. And Heather's also a nationally registered emergency medical technician, which is always very useful. Heather believes in working from a place of unconditional compassion with forthright edginess, which I love and which you embody so beautifully, I have to say. She is also, as I mentioned, she's a classically trained homeopath, a clinical homeopath with over 10 years of teaching, practice, and experience, and also holds a degree in systems psychology. And Heather also leads really amazing sounding retreats using her own curriculum, which we'll go into as well during this conversation. Heather has experience working in a variety of focus areas, including addiction, trauma, veteran needs, cancer, eating disorders, mental illness, end of life, homelessness, and parenting. And I'm going to put links to how to get in touch with Heather if you want to work with her, find out more about her. I'll put all the links in our little box underneath the video. So Heather, so our conversation, it's just going to be kind of pretty free flowing, focused on homeopathy. I'm just, I love homeopathy. I'm such a fan. It's helped me so much in my life. And just like a little history of how first of all, I just want to hand the floor over to you for a moment and just actually ask you what brought you to homeopathy, and then I can talk a little bit about how I came to it, and then we can dive in. So yeah, what brought you to homeopathy?
Yeah, I love that question, and I'm looking forward to hearing your origin story with it as well. I was 18 years old, and I had a number of health issues. I was on a cocktail of medications, and I had grown very frustrated. Doctors told me, this is your life. You will be sick. You are a sick person, and you need to get used to this. And I specifically remember a conversation where the doctor said, this is just your life. And I was very depressed, and the sickness and the response from the doctors was giving rise to this incredible depression. And I became suicidal. And I moved out of my parents' house, and my roommate, her partner's mother, was going through cancer treatment and working with a homeopath. And she said, look, I don't know what it's all about, but I know she really likes this woman and she's helped her a lot. She might be able to make you feel better. So for my birthday, I asked my parents to pay for a homeopathic consult, and everybody threw their arms up in the air, like, what is this? What are we doing? And after 4 hours with this woman, she said, you are not sick. There is nothing wrong with you. And we are going to make you feel better. And I did not believe her. I did not know what to make of the 4 hours we had spent together. It was very unusual. And I started on a remedy. The next 4 days, I experienced a number of aggravations, which we can kind of touch on what that means. But she kept telling me, write it out. This is good. Write it out. This is good. by the end of the first week, I had forgotten about my chronic stomach aches. My sleep had changed. My nightmares were gone. I had not been taking my medication for 7 days. And it was immediately mind-blowing to me what I was experiencing from these little tiny, bizarre little pellets. And so I was sold from day one, because what I wanted more than anything was relief and to not be on my medications. And within a week, that was what was happening for me. So that started me on the path, and I've not diverged since.
Gorgeous. Yeah. I mean, it's very similar. Yeah. Similar to a lot of my experiences with it. Just this, what I grew up with. So when I was exposed to homeopathy when I was really, really young. I was born in India, and so my first 10 years were spent in India. And I have these early memories of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, whom I was very close to. She had a homeopath, and so homeopathy was very much, Ayurveda, which is from India, and homeopathy were both very much kind of part of, like, I didn't understand what homeopathy was because I was so young, but I was familiar with the homeopath. She would see a homeopathic doctor and homeopathic remedies and these kinds of things. So, and I was familiar with seeing the little pellets and even being given some as a child for various things. And my grandmother's, dog would be given. So it was just kind of in my life, even though I didn't really understand it. And then fast forward many years later, I'd moved. By this point, my family and I had, immigrated to England. And when I was kind of, early 20s, my body started, just having a lot of autoimmune expressions like alopecia and various other issues started showing up. And so we went to the doctor with my mum. And the doctor said a similar thing to me. You've got autoimmune things. It's incurable, and you're going to have to be on steroids forever. So my mom was like, okay, we just needed the diagnosis, and thanks. And we went, and, just to me, the whole concept of incurable, just even to that young mind who hadn't sort of started on the healing path in the way that I have, was like, no, it just was like, didn't resonate. And so yeah, my mom was like, yeah, we're not doing the steroids thing. So we started with Ayurvedic medicine and homeopathy, just the things that I'd kind of grown up with. And both of those things really helped me so much. The homeopathic route just really helped to start unraveling a lot of the trauma that was underlying a lot of what was sort of coming up, and it helped to kind of resolve at the time, and then the symptoms sort of dissolved, and then they came back later in life. And again, I went down the same route, and homeopathy helped, and changing my diet and Ayurveda helped. So just, so I've just always found for the autoimmune expressions in my body, like, homeopathy just comes towards it in this very, like, gentle way, like, let's work with the symptoms. Let's work, which, I know we're going to talk about, just let's work with the way that your body, let's move in the direction that your body's going in. And sometimes that will mean a little bit of intensification of those. And then that means that there's a clearing out, but there's no pushing inwards, pushing further into the tissues of the body, which is sadly what the mainstream allopathic model does. This is not an either or conversation, though.
That's right.
We're just kind of, just contrasting and comparing the two. So with that, I just want to segue into the whole, being a homeopath. And, when I mention to people oh, I take homeopathic medicine or try a homeopathic remedy, I just get so much like it's just a placebo and you don't believe in that, do you? And I usually always start off with, well, it worked on me as a child and it's worked on animals and it's worked on other children, like babies, infants. So that to me debunks the whole placebo argument. So I just, yeah, want to speak to you about that, how you kind of speak to people who come at you with that
Yeah.
whole narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also recognize that like homeopathy isn't for everybody. And so there are people who have this profound resistance to it. And so I'm very mindful of the individual with whom I'm speaking and how they seem to want to be met in the conversation. And what you said is very common to what I say. Some of the greatest success stories that we see with homeopathy are young children, babies, newborns, and animals. And part of the reason for that is because they don't have the nocebo, which is something that Bruce Lipton talks about, other providers talk about, which is this idea that this isn't going to work. They don't have that. So the homeopathy has complete access to do whatever it's going to do in their system. And they certainly don't have placebo because they don't even have that concept. My daughter was given a remedy within 24 hours of life, and the doctors were flabbergasted by her response. And of course, they would not credit homeopathy with what had happened, but I was perfectly happy with what had happened. And so for me, I also know in my training, we learned a lot about the studies that have taken place. And one of the things that happened with homeopathy when it became a little bit more well-known is that the Western medical systems said, let's put it through some paces. Let's put it through some scientific studies. And what they did was they took homeopathic remedies and put them through studies the same way they would with an allopathic medication. And they don't work that way. So what they did was they took a large group of people and gave them all one remedy for one condition, by the way, for which those remedies weren't even indicated, and said, they don't work. Now, as homeopaths, we look at that and go, well, of course that didn't work. We wouldn't expect it to. Now, there are other cases where there have been double-blind studies where the groups were given a group of remedies to work with for a specific condition and found tremendous results. The problem with those studies was that the results were so profound, the organizations running the studies, these large universities, didn't want to publish them because they were troubled by the profundity of the response. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm able to speak to in great detail, again, depending on who I'm speaking with, that says, how far into this do you want to go? Because we can go pretty deep in this. And if it doesn't resonate, then don't do it. I've also had clients who will come to me for consults, and I'll offer them the remedy recommendation, and they'll go, you know what? It's down to the wire. Like, I just don't believe in it. I can't do it. I say, well, there's a couple things. One, you don't have to. You don't have to believe in it for the remedy to work. And you can just not take the remedy. It's up to you, right? And one of those was my favorite. She said, I'm married to a doctor. I don't know what I was thinking. I can't believe that this is going to do anything for me. And I said, you don't have to. Go ahead and take it. I had my follow-up with, and she disagreed with my assessment. She wanted me to give her a full assessment of her case. She said, I disagree with it. I don't like what you found. I don't like what you saw. Okay. 2 weeks later, she called me. And the minute I answered the phone, I said, you're back, aren't you? And she said, I am back. One dose of a remedy, and she had a complete turnaround. And so I was like, look, you don't have to believe in it. It's worth a shot. What I'll also add there is selecting your remedies yourself off the shelf at the natural health food store is not the same as having a homeopathic consult, because they don't work one-to-one the same way we would think about Western medications. It's important to work with a trained homeopath who can help select the remedy that's well suited to what's actually going on, and not that sort of rote prescription kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And that to me is like, it's such an important distinction, because it's not this just rote, like you say, this kind of just prescribed by numbers thing. Oh, you've got this, here, take this. It's like you have to look at the history of the person, their constitution. Again, Ayurveda does the same thing. It's like, looking at all of the elements that make up that particular individual, their ancestry, their history, their childhood, their diet, their current lifestyle, everything comes into focus. And then and then a trained homeopath would know, like, okay, do this, start with this, then move on to this. So yeah, I mean, and so it's this really tailor-made, nuanced, subtle approach. And can you speak a little bit about sort of the kind of, not, you don't have to go into like great detail about the kind of technicalities of homeopathy, but just the kind of fundamental principles of homeopathy, like the fundamental strands, one or two of them.
Yeah, that's great. So there's a couple of them. One is like cures like, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And the other one is nanodosing. And this idea of nanodosing is, I think, what also throws a lot of Western folks off, because if you look at a remedy under a microscope, there's none of the molecular structure of the element from which the remedy is made visible. And so they go, well, how can it do anything? It's not there. The way remedies are made is there's a process called potentization. And so this potentization releases the energetic essence, essentially, of the substance. You can't see energetic essence under a microscope, and that makes people very uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable with it in the beginning. And the more I studied homeopathy, I kind of went through a period of like, I can't wrap my head around this. What I've learned through years of working with it is there's just something that happens in the quantum field where the body recognizes the trace elements of that energetic signature, so much so that I've been given remedies and the homeopath wouldn't tell me what they were. She put it in a little white envelope, said, I'm not telling you what this is because you're going to look it up. I'm not telling you. And she gave it to me. And on the follow-up, I said, every night I'm having this crazy dream. And she said, what's the dream? And I said, I'm carrying around this rotten potato in a basket like it's a baby. And she burst into laughter. And I said, what are you laughing? And she said, rotten potato is your remedy. My body knew. My system knew what this, I said, they make a remedy out of rotten potato. I didn't even know this. But this was, my body recognized the energetic signature of this element. And so it's things like that that continue to blow my mind around how our bodies are just able to recognize. So that's one of the key elements, is the nanodosing. And that's part of why it's so safe. That's why we don't see things like suppression, side effects, downstream long-term effects, because we're working with the absolute minimum dose. That was one of the other principles, is how little can we give the organism and get a response. So that's, you'll notice in homeopathic prescription, as soon as you recognize a response, stop taking the remedy. People go, oh, really? Like, yes, don't keep taking it if you feel better. That means the ripples are moving, let them ripple, right? So again, totally different than what we're used to in Western medicine. And the like cures like is really interesting. I like explaining to people how Hahnemann kind of discovered homeopathy, because he was a translator. He was a medical physician. He spoke multiple languages. And so he was a translator for medical texts at the time. This is in the late 1700s. And he was translating a medical text on quinine as a treatment for malaria. And the text was suggesting that the quinine was able to treat malaria due to the effects, the bitterness of the quinine and the bitterness effects on the digestive system. And Hahnemann sort of said, this doesn't kind of feel like an explanation to me, actually. I want to understand this. And so he began himself, as a healthy individual, to take quinine. And what he developed was the symptoms of malaria. And so he immediately knew something was happening here in this system of quinine treating malaria. And if a healthy person takes it, they develop the symptoms. So he immediately began studying different substances and saying, what happens when we get arsenicum was, I think, the second remedy that came about, arsenicum album. He triturated it to a very small amount, potentized it, and started giving it to people. And of course, what did they get? They got the symptoms of arsenic poisoning, right? But in a way that was tolerable for their system. And arsenicum is now one of our most common remedies. It's used for a number of things that, if you want to know what it treats, look at what arsenic poisoning looks like. The burning in the stomach, burning, anything coming out of the body that's burning, severe stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, food poisoning, fear of death.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's just so much there that I want to speak to. The first thing, of course, I think the first thing that kind of gets people who are kind of skeptical of this whole thing is when the moment the moment things are mentioned like on an energetic level, people
Mhm.
immediately get like, oh, this is just woo woo, and this is just
Mhm.
this, and this is just that. And really it's that remembering that we are, you know, we are all operating on energetic levels and frequencies, whether or not you believe in that or not. It's kind of like science is now proving, quantum science is now proving this, and the ancients have known this for a really, really long time. And you know, I find it quite arrogant that just the modern viewpoint, mainstream viewpoint, just kind of pushes that out of the way when it's like ancient shamanic cultures from all over the world have spoken to this, and earth-based indigenous traditions. So, you know, and so this is where we might get a little bit esoteric. um, like Heather's like done, you know, just like unpack the kind of the origins of it. And the reason why I wanted to speak to Heather about this conversation, I was recently writing an essay about, you know, working with the symptoms. Like I do somatic work with groups and people, individuals, and you know, it's just like working with the sensation, working with the symptom, and homeopathy works in the same way. And then I started thinking about, you know, medicine ceremonies that I've sat in, trainings that I've done with shamanic trainings that I've done, and it's all about working with the symptoms, you know, paying attention to the symptoms. The symptoms are messenger, not shooting the messenger, but like paying attention, like which direction is it asking me to go? It's showing me something. The body's always showing us something through its symptoms. And even though, you know, I was familiar with the origins of homeopathy as you've just described, I started thinking about homeopathy while I was writing this piece, and I was like, it feels like homeopathy is like this because the European indigenous traditions were completely wiped out, as we know, uh, you know, just annihilated, and not really, they didn't really kind of, you know, outside of sort of what's now become known as kind of like kitchen witchery and these kinds of things, like specific shamanic traditions from Europe, indigenous shamanic traditions from Europe were really, yeah, they just don't exist anymore. And I feel like, you know, so strands of wisdom, they just they just live in the ether. And you know, when the people that carry those traditions and are the channels for that wisdom are wiped out, it's like that's still alive. It's like these living strands of wisdom and energy. And I feel that the founder of homeopathy, whose name I forget, you just mentioned, I've forgotten. I feel like it was like a download, almost like a following of the breadcrumbs, to, because you know, homeopathy is a you know, is a Western modality, but it has so many it's just similarities to indigenous traditions. So I feel like it's this kind of, it's managed to filter its way into the brain of someone who was like looking and being curious and open, and it's like, oh, if I follow the symptom and like curing like, which, you know, you see that if you speak to um a shaman from Peru, they will tell you similar things about like curing like, and looking for plants and roots and herbs that have a similar feeling tone to the symptom or the issue that a person is facing. So all that to say is like this, like, yeah, I mean, and I said this is like esoteric and unprovable in that sense, but just that, you know, that it feels to me, and of course, you know, then you've got things like flower essences, which is just like another branch of homeopathy. Um, you know, again, this it feels like it's this indigenous wisdom tradition from Europe that has made its, you know, that has found its way to found a way to survive.
Yeah. Yep. And I think there was something innate in Hahnemann that, which supports what you're saying, where he was really concerned about medicine at the time in general because of the way they were treating patients, this idea of suppression, this idea of there's something wrong with the body. He was particularly concerned about how mental health was being handled by medical professionals, and he felt like something's not right. And so he was pursuing this, like, we're missing something here on a grand scale. And I think as soon as he was able to make this connection between the like cures like, he was able to really start to follow and understand the wisdom of the body, what's happening. And I can tell you, it's funny, now that I've got a lot of experience as a homeopath, I see this. My clients will come, they'll make an appointment for an intake, and I'll either hear from them in the days leading up to it, or they'll show up for the intake and they'll go, I don't know what's going on. This week has been crazy. My symptoms are out of control. I had symptoms I had before that I've forgotten about that have come back. We haven't even had the intake yet, but there's something in the field. It's just like when people are getting ready to do plant medicine and everything gets stirred up on the way to do the plant medicine. What is the explanation for that? Well, the whole system knows this opportunity is coming, and it's the same with the remedy. And I always kind of chuckle because I'm like, well, your system wants to make sure we don't miss anything. It wants you to remember. It wants me to have this information so that I can synthesize it while I'm making an assessment of your case. And to me, that is evidence of, that's all the evidence I need, right? Is seeing it happen in this real energetic way. And Rohini, I have a lot of clients who don't come from a resonance with homeopathy. Most of my referrals come from medical doctors. Most of my referrals are from MDs. And that's what gets some people sort of curious, that they raise their eyebrows. It's, are you kidding? No, I'm the one that they send people to when they don't know what else to say. And you know, I have 4 primary MDs that I work with that send me referrals. And so these people are not coming because they're resonating with homeopathy. They're coming out of usually desperation and saying, I don't really care. They is someone I trust who told me to come to you. Whatever you want to do, let's do it. And then they start having energetic experiences. It's like, look, this is, you don't have to believe in this stuff for it to happen. It's just the strength of the field. And I think that Hahnemann was in the strength of the field already with his connection to what real healing meant. He had this innate connection. This is why he studied in all these languages. This is why he pursued study the way he did. And he was absolutely rigorous about his scientific method in how he studied people before they got a remedy, and for months after, and, you know, least possible dose and those sort of things. I mean, he was very calculated in what he was doing. And I think that's where some of the profundity came, was in this intense discernment around where the real potency in this process is.
Yeah. I mean, the way I'm kind of even just visualizing, it's like this person with this very rigorous, conscientious approach and attitude, this very, you know, just focused scientific approach, and that wisdom that's in the field that's like needs a human channel to come through. It's like, okay, it has to be him, because he will be able to put it out there in the way that it needs to. And I, you know, and to whoever's listening to this who's just like rolling their eyes, it's like, okay, that's totally fine. But, you know, just when something comes through, it's something that's you're having, something's communing with you and wanting to move through you out into the world. It needs a human to do that for them. And so, you know, and just the whole modality of homeopathy, the way that it's developed in this way, the way that it can help people in this way, just on this very subtle energetic level. It's like, that's a very ancient, it just feels like a very ancient practice.
Yeah. And being comfortable with the discomfort. I think that's really important, right? Is to say, this is real healing, is not suppression. It is not body as enemy. It is not negation of experience.
Exactly.
It is, what's the real wisdom here, and what wants to happen, and the fortification of the individual and their entire system, spiritually, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically through this process of healing by being with. And that doesn't mean not treating symptoms. It means treating them in a way that supports the inherent wisdom that comes with them.
Yeah. The symptom is the messenger. It's an ally. It's guiding us to something. And this again is, you know, it's this, and as you know, I'm, you know, in the field of decolonization work. And this is such, and that applies to all of us, regardless of where we come from. It's like we've been, the colonization that I talk about is this psychological soul level colonization where we have to fight with ourselves, fight with our bodies, make the body the enemy, and then we project that outwards and onto the other, you know, whoever's different out there. And so, you know, just as we do that to the other in the body, in this case the symptoms, which are showing us something, it's like, it, to me, that's a form, you know, when we the way that medicine has moved into this kind of need to aggressively suppress and push symptoms further into the tissues and cells of the body, is to me a form of is a colonial approach. Like, we're doing that to ourselves, we're doing that out there, we're waging war on ourselves in this way, we're waging war on ourselves out there, on each other out there. And so modalities like homeopathy, Ayurveda, shamanic plant medicine, it just all looks at these, you know, just like, okay, what is this symptom showing me? How can I work with it? And so, yeah, you mentioned aggravations at the beginning. So yeah, can you speak to that a little bit within this context and just within the homeopathic context?
Yeah, so I want to open that conversation with another little piece where we talk about the body's wisdom. One of the things that we learn in homeopathy is that there's, and you're speaking directly to this, and I want to go a little bit more explicit with it so folks understand. There's really a sort of hierarchy of process. We call it direction of cure. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's this direction of illness that happens in the body. And so assuming that an individual has a vital force, is what we call it, because we don't have a direct translation from what Hahnemann's language was, but this is really like chi, right? This is really our life energy. The body is going to use the least invasive mechanism possible to eradicate pathology. And pathology can come in any form. It can be genetic, epigenetic, environmental, psychological, social, emotional, viral, whatever, right? And so a lot of times we start out early in life with things on our skin, because the skin is the least invasive way. We can live with a lot of stuff going on with our skin and still be okay. Plus, it's our biggest organ. So we have a lot of space to work with when it comes to, you know, eradicating pathology. But we don't like skin stuff in Western, right? So we immediately suppress it. And now the vital force goes, okay, now what? Where am I going to go next? Now I'm going to go to organs of 2, or I'm going to go to organs that can withstand a little bit more of the pathological expression. So we go to lungs and stomach. So then Western medicine knows there's a connection between suppressed eczema and asthma, but we don't talk about it. We just say it's a mystery. But in homeopathy, it's actually not a mystery, because what happens is, and we've seen this before, and this is, you know, that relationship goes deeper and deeper and deeper. The more we suppress, okay, now we're on heavy steroids for the asthma, maybe we're on medications for the stomach stuff. It's going to go deeper and deeper into the tissues, then muscles, then bones, organs, and brain. So that's kind of the general process. What happens when we give a good fitting remedy is those things come out backwards. So the most recent symptom that was suppressed is typically the first thing to show up. And so it can, now this often, very rarely do I have aggravations in my practice. When I have them, I walk through the client. This is what's happening. It means the vital force recognizes the remedy as a fit. It's taking action, and the body's telling us, I have enough of the remedy. Don't give me any more. And what we're doing is riding those ripples out. through the system as it's eradicating the pathology. But you can see the chronology of suppression in the individual, in the reverse order as things start to come back out. So we had a particular clinic case of a young girl. She was having a lot of breathing issues, got her on a remedy, and she had all these skin issues, and mom was upset. And we said, she said, I put her on all these meds to make this go away. I don't want this problem. We said, this is actually her body healing. Let's ride out the skin, because usually the aggravations are not that troubling. The child was not complaining. It was an optical thing. And within a few days it had passed and her breathing issues were improved. So, but I also see it in people who've been sick a lot. They're much further on in life, and there's been a lot of suppression, possibly even multiple surgeries. You have to be very careful when you're dosing and when you're tracking the effects of the remedy, but it's really not uncommon for some of that stuff to kind of just go away with the subtle effects of the remedy.
Yeah. And it's this, like my own experience with homeopathy and speaking to you and, other people who work with homeopathy, homeopathic remedies, just the way that the body wants to move towards a state of balance. And there's, again, this, we talk about pathologizing. There's this pathologizing of the body. Like, what's wrong with my body? Why can't I fit, why can't my body be doing, this? My body's letting me down. It's disease, this, that, and the other. It's like, no, your body's communicating with you that there's an imbalance that needs to be addressed. Yes. And the moment that starts being addressed in this way, in this holistic as in whole systems way, rather than this compartmentalized, cut into pieces way, in this, whole systems way, the body just immediately starts having more space, more capacity to move into balance. And that's kind of, it's similar principles in somatic work, somatic therapy, working with sensations, to work through trauma and other things. And so it's just like the body is always wanting to find the path of least resistance, just like nature, finding the path of least resistance. And our bodies are not separate from nature, separate from the earth. And so it's like, and exactly, it's like, okay, now I've had enough, you can stop now. Rather than this culture of just having to take a medication for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Because the body is not trusted to stabilize on its own. And because when you take it away, then the symptoms will start showing again, because the body's going to start telling you again, hey, you've stopped suppressing the symptoms, so can we deal with them? So it's like, so it's this, it's this, the whole notion of having to take, whether it's medication or a remedy for the rest of your life, is, again, this, it's like anathema to healing.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I also want to state, because we did kind of talk about, it's not one or the other. Yeah. Right. And I do very much, I've worked with homeopaths that have a very dogmatic approach about stop taking your meds. I can't work with you if you're on medication, whatever. I'm very much integrated. And so I know what has worked for certain individuals and what has worked for others. And so I'm very much an advocate for this sort of putting the puzzle together approach. And as you also know, one of the other things I do is I work with plant medicines, and there's this remarkable relationship, between homeopathy and plant medicine work. And so there becomes this orientation of what is the potential for what wants to be in this person's field. And sometimes relieving a certain set of symptoms allopathically is in alignment. And I just want to name it. I want to make sure people understand that we're not, and I know, because you and I have talked about this, we're not coming from a position of this is good and that is bad. It's really what is in right relationship right now, and what wants to happen to get this person to the next phase. Because sometimes those adjuncts, those allopathics are needed to get to a certain phase where then there's a readiness or there's a fortification that now will enable what wants to happen for a different kind of healing. And so there's an art to that, and there's a delicacy to it. And I just feel like naming that is important for people who are curious about, hey, look, I really rely on this medication. What does that mean for me?
Mm-hmm.
It just means we're looking at a different configuration of the puzzle pieces.
Yeah. And I love that. I love what I think it's really important to name that, this integration, this both and when necessary, and this being in right relationship. It's like, if it's like, you wouldn't tell with a heroin addict, you wouldn't just make them come off. I'm not saying that people who take pharmaceutical medication are akin to, but I'm saying that you wouldn't ask an addict to just immediately stop. It's going to be dangerous for their system. They have to titrate off. So it's that, and homeopathy doesn't contraindicate with pharmaceuticals. It doesn't, so it works. It can work synergistically with whatever medications a person, pharmaceuticals a person happens to be on. So yeah, whatever a person's system needs. Yeah, I really, that right relationship is a really important thing to name. And actually, you mentioned the plant medicine work that you do. So yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because I'm excited about your innovations around plant medicine, ceremonial plant medicine, and homeopathy that you're kind of looking to bring out into the world. But first of all, tell us a little bit about your work with plant medicine and the specific medicines that you've been working with.
I came to plant medicine sort of later in life, is what I'll say, because of my homeopathic background. I was a social worker. I was, I had my degree in psychology. I was very by the book. And so psychedelics were like really taboo. They were stigmatized to me. And so I wasn't going to touch them. And so I have this really rich background with homeopathy and understanding the power of homeopathy. And I started to get interested in psychedelics more than a few years ago from a data perspective. This is when research was getting good, right? This is when we were starting to have studies come out of MAPS that were like, okay, wait a minute, there's something really interesting happening here. And so I had my first psychedelic experience, and I said, this is like a remedy on steroids. This is a remedy, is a pebble in the pond, and a psychedelic, a well-selected, well-curated psychedelic experience is a boulder. It's the same forces, it's the same dimensions, it's just a different level of intensity. And so what started happening for me as I started to learn the medicines and work with them, and I primarily work with MDMA, psilocybin, and 5-MeO-DMT. I also work in a support role with Ibogaine, which is separate. I don't serve that myself. I started to immediately see a correlation between people who came with a certain degree of readiness to the psychedelics and the potency of their experiences thereafter. And I thought to myself, I want to give everybody who's going to take psychedelics a remedy first, because I know what these remedies are going to do. And having my own practice doing all of them, it took me a while to kind of get the confidence to say, look, this is just what I do. And if people come to me for a psychedelic experience, I say, look, I actually have a different format. We're going to have some coaching sessions that's required anyway. Are you open to homeopathy? And if they're not, that's a different conversation, because what happens when I can get them on a remedy is things start shifting very quickly. First of all, their acute need to do psychedelics shifts. They are no longer in a state of desperation. They're now in a state of curiosity with, what can this do for me? Those remedies have already started to shift their psychological thought process. It has started to typically to bring some of that etiology to the surface. You talked about that. What are these root causes? What are the things that my body is trying to bring my attention to? What's in my history that I've been distracted from or avoiding that I don't want to face? And really importantly to me, what skills do I need to sit and be with it? Because the plant medicines can't do for us what we won't do for ourselves. And the remedies that's the sandbox. And people get on a remedy and stuff starts coming up. I'm having memories. This new thing makes me cry now that I've always ignored it in the past. I'm starting to notice I don't want to be in this relationship in the same way. These really subtle things that often don't get credited to the remedy, which is fine with me. I find it entertaining, but it's these shifts. And so what I tell people is we are excavating, we are cracking the surface. So if we time it right, and if we do the work right, that plant medicine can go right to the core, and it can just do some really potent healing work, versus that being the mechanism that has to crack the layers. And the other thing that happens with that is, because homeopathy is subtle and gentle, I don't have clients who are coming out of a psychedelic experience going, I don't know what to do with just what just happened. It was too much. And I do have a fair number of referrals that did not work with me on their psychedelic experience and come in and had one of those. So they go, I don't know what to do with this. They've got 30 years of suppressed grief that they didn't even know was there because it was so suppressed. And they did a psychedelic and it ripped the cork out, and now they can't function, right? That's hard. That's really hard for people. And they're well-intentioned people who just wanted growth, but had no idea what was beneath the surface. And so we use remedies to restabilize.
I love that. Just, my whole body is going, yes, just in response to what you're saying, because, especially what you said about, starting people off with, the subtle, gentle homeopathic remedies so that they transition from this place of desperation to this place of curiosity, in it to come into relationship with the plant medicine. Because when you sit with plant medicine in ceremony, you're coming into relationship with a being, with with the spirit of the plant. And when you're just like, what can I get, this extractive kind of attitude that we all seem to, again, colonized by, just like, heal me, fix me, what can I get? And the plant medicine goes straight into that layer of the ego and smashes that layer. So if we can come in with that already gone away a bit, and just like, oh, how can I come into relationship with this being through this plant medicine, then there's more of that brings in, again, this decolonial lens, this animistic lens of like being in relationship with this plant spirit that's going to help you. And can you be present with it, rather than just like, give me what I need so I can be fixed. So just the fact that you are able to give people homeopathic remedies to get them in that mindset when they come into ceremony is gorgeous. Because I've sat in ceremony on many occasions, and that has definitely been, the first time, I was very much of that mindset of like, I need to be fixed. And there's more work for the plant medicine to do, and it's not always pleasant.
That's right. And another thing that I love about it, let's imagine that the experience is profoundly pleasant, and they feel exponentially more ready for whatever life has to offer, and more open and more free following the psychedelic experience. They may then over attribute that to the psychedelic, forgetting or not really understanding that this was a co-creation. Whereas if they start that process on a remedy, they are now seeing the changes that they're making in their life in real time. They're recognizing thought pattern changes and taking action and saying, I quit my job, I'm going to the gym more, I'm more responsible with money, I have a more balanced relationship with food. They're in empowerment. And so bringing that sense of empowerment to that relationship allows them to take those gems from the experience, whether they're humbling or uplifting, whatever they may be, and say, I know how to integrate. I know how to be empowered in what I'm getting in these gifts. And I think that's really valuable too, because it doesn't extract them from this relationship. I love that word, with the medicine.
Yeah. And it's, because that really is what, with the kind of popularity of psychedelics and plant medicine, whether it's microdosing or sitting in ceremony and doing macrodoses, these plants and these substances. Sorry, my dog is wanting to go out. This is a very casual format. These plants and these, you know, these mushrooms, these earth beings, plant beings, they are they they are animate. They are part of, you know, they're part of a living system that want to communicate with us, that want to help us. But if we are interacting with them on this, but you know, like, this is just a substance that I'm taking to make me better, then we are, you know, we're not interacting with them on a subject level, like, which is what animism is all about. We're just like subject object, like, give me what I need. So yeah, that kind of, that relationality goes away. And you know, and when you sit in ceremony with shamans from indigenous cultures, it's all about being in relationship with the plant, with the medicine. Which takes me on to the medicine ceremonies that you facilitate and work in. And you know, and you've been doing a lot of that down in Mexico recently. And also, yeah, so tell us about that, and also about 5-MeO, which I did not know about before I spoke to you. I had no idea that existed.
Oh, yeah. So I have a number of formats. Some of them we do group ceremonies with, you know, whether it's the same gender or a same area of focus that come to a particular medicine. And I do a lot of individual guided work. And everything that I do that's individual is curated for the individual. So nothing I do is rote. I have people who will come to my house for a whole week, and we do a variety of integration, preparation, Reiki. We're doing very intensive work. These are people who may need a large lift to get from one to the other. I have people who come for an afternoon and they've got a driver. And so it just really depends on who it is, what they're trying to achieve, and what their goals are. And it's very much based on the individual and their goals. And it's the same with the medicine that's selected. Sometimes they come and they go, I want this experience. And that makes it a little bit more, you know, sort of black and white to choose the medicine. But then sometimes they come and they go, I don't know what I need. Here's the work that I've done, and here's what I'm seeking. And then we say, okay, let's dig in and see what wants to show up in terms of the medicines. And 5-MeO DMT is DMT is a substance that our brain produces naturally. It floods our system at birth and at death. And so one of the things that happens when we consume 5-MeO DMT is we have this experience of our default mode network, which is a part of our brain we typically refer to as ego. Our conscious mind that says, I am Heather, I have a body, this is my relationship to the world. It turns that off, usually in a very rapid fashion. And in therapeutic doses, in a therapeutic environment, someone is able to then enter what we call a non-dual state. And it's the state where it is pure subconscious without the interference of the default mode network or the ego. And it can be profoundly difficult to integrate for people because there are truly no words for it, because it has no correlation to any experience that we have in our known form. It can also be profoundly powerful, even without that ability to articulate or receive clear, you know, psilocybin, ayahuasca, people go, oh, here are the messages I got. 5-MeO is sometimes not like that. It's really more of an experience. It's a somatic experience. It's a sensational experience. And typically people come out and go, I don't know what to say. And so don't say anything, right? These are not, we don't need words. And sometimes, you know, it takes a while to really sort of unpack and let that experience unfold. But it's a beautiful medicine in the right context. It's a very powerful, it's the most powerful psychedelic. People will say the same thing about ibogaine, but there's nuances in there, in that the 5-MeO is the most powerful in that you are completely offline. Whereas ibogaine, you're not completely offline. It's a profound experience. It's a rigorous experience, but you're lucid. So that's the differentiation between those two.
And with 5-MeO, what's it synthesized from? Is it from plant material is it? Yeah, what's it made of?
Yeah, so there's two forms. There's Bufo alvarius or Encilius alvarius, which is the Sonoran desert toad. And it is a venomous toad. It lives underground for 9 months of the year. And when it emerges from underground, it has sacs on its neck and on its hind quarters that are full of the venom. And so indigenous people who take care of these toads will milk the toads and spread the venom on a piece of glass, let it dry in the sun, flake it off, and then that's what is smoked. Now, milligram wise for the 5-MeO, it's not a direct correlation. We don't always know how much 5-MeO we're getting in the bufo, right? And it has other elements in it, namely bufotine, which for some people is beneficial. Some people don't react as well to the bufotine. 5-MeO DMT, the molecule by itself, which is exactly the same molecule that's found in Bufo alvarius, is can be purely synthesized. It's used in that way. It doesn't have the complication of the bufotine, and the milligram dosage can be done in a very precise way because we know it's not different based on the season. It's not different based on the toad. It is exactly milligram for milligram what you're getting in the 5-MeO. Now, you will find practitioners who say the bufo is better. It's natural. You'll also find practitioners who say the 5-MeO is better. It's pure. We know exactly how much we're getting. It's really a matter of preference, what one wants to work with. From an experience standpoint, people are having the same experience with the two substances. So, and I know that can be very different for schools of thought. This is based on my experience working with both extensively.
Yeah. And how did you sort of come across Bufo 5-MeO, whichever one your first experience was?
Yeah, that was my first psychedelic experience, by the way. I was really not interested in mushrooms, MDMA. It was sort of like, nah, it sounds like party drugs to me, even with the research. And I had a friend that had been wanting to do it. And she said, it's kind of like a near-death experience. I said, that sounds good. Sign me up. And she said, are you joking? I said, no, let's go. And so I went, and that was really sort of my first experience. We traveled to a place where we could use it. We worked with a medical practitioner, which was very comforting for both of us. And I am unable to recollect most of my experience. What I know was that I was a very different person emerging from that experience
afterwards.
Yeah.
And I feel like with substances like 5-MeO, ayahuasca, psilocybin, ketamine, all of these these medicines that are now being used therapeutically, the integration part is so important. And I think people are just, coming to understand that now, whereas in the past, it's not really, unless people have gone away to Peru and spent like a whole 2 weeks, where, they do ceremonies, they integrate, whereas, but the integration part has not always been given as much emphasis as it ought to, because it's like how to reintegrate back into life, like to speak, like how do I don't, speaking words after coming out of this very non-dual space, but not wanting to lose that, but needing to embody that and then be in the world.
Yes. And really thinking about the context of one's experience. This is really important. And it's something we talk about in preparation is if one is in an environment that's not supportive and doesn't understand plant medicines and doesn't lend itself to these sort of esoteric conversations, and they don't have close relationships of trust, their ability to get the most potency out of a psychedelic experience is very different than someone who's got a community. They've got supportive relationships. They've already got language for it. It's allowed in their intimate relationships. So there's a lot of factors that tie into, I think, one's readiness for psychedelics. And I don't say readiness from a position of authority. I mean, truly, what are we bringing to the experience, and what is our ability to synthesize that and carry forward those changes that took place?
Yeah. And I think, just that, you know, that's so much, just like integrating that back into the body, back into the life that we will re-enter back into, where it's like, oh, my partner or my children or my work co-workers did not have this experience, they're still, you know, so it's like, how can I meet them where I'm at from where I've just been to? And so just wanting to kind of close, but before we do, I really want to talk about your kind of vision for uniting homeopathy with psychedelics.
Yeah, my vision includes education.
Mm-hmm.
And my vision includes actually doing something that's a little bit not necessarily always heard of in the homeopathic realm, but creating some protocols so that psychedelic practitioners know what to look for. Who's a good candidate for homeopathy first? And what do you do with that person? Who's a good candidate for homeopathy after? I'm creating a training course. So this will be great if anyone's interested coming to my website. I'm creating a training course for homeopathics for psychedelics. And so really this is for psychedelic practitioners or people who engage on a regular basis and who want to learn about what are some good remedies to have on hand during or after a challenging experience. So that's a kind of a really small but very specific kit that I'm actually building myself that says these are the remedies that can help with these particular outcomes that can be challenging. I think just that is going to help people understand the beautiful synergy between these two realms. I'm also writing a series of books. Some of them is working on creating literature that just simply doesn't exist in the homeopathic world to understand psychedelics in their homeopathic form, but then also to speak to this relationship that's going to be in this course about why they fit so well together, how to help them live together from both the homeopathic perspective and the psychedelic practitioner perspective. And then the other thing that I'm doing, and I'm so excited about this, Rohini, is I'm going to be conducting some homeopathic provings. And so that is going to help. And what that means is I'm bringing in a group of individuals who do not know what the substances are that we're working with, and they're going to help us extract the effects of particular remedies, and that will get written into books, and those remedies will be made and distributed out into the world. And this is a huge area of impact. But what I'm finding is because of the rapid pace of psychedelics and the acceleration that's happening there, we have such a gift with homeopathy because it's so accessible to help people prepare and land. I think this is a spotlight time for homeopathy as much as for psychedelics. And I think if people, even if they don't make it a way of life, you know, engaging with homeopathic remedies, to just have it on the radar and say, you know, I don't feel the same way after this journey that I felt after the last one. There's something lingering with me. Maybe this is grief, and maybe I do want to try a remedy. That kind of thing is really going to help people understand how they can benefit from both, not just one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, just that the union of the two is, to me, it just feels so, you know, having experienced the wonders that homeopathy can do for you and plant medicine psychedelics can do, it's like, oh wow, yes, like they it's this very natural, there's just this very natural harmonious synergy, and I'm so excited for what you've got. So where are you in that process right now?
I'm in the case study phase. So I'm collecting my case studies and just putting them together in an outline form. The curriculum's being written. That course, the homeopathy and psychedelics course, is actually going to run early next year. So that's almost ready to start advertising. And the book, that's going to write itself. One of the other things that I'm looking to do is to start speaking more. I've spoken at a lot of psychedelic conferences. I'd like to start speaking at homeopathic conferences and start speaking to this relationship, because there's just, there's such an opportunity there. And I really see people can start to, it's going to open eyes very quickly when you hear from the other side about it. And I'm really excited about that shared space.
I am as well. And I'll be posting all of Heather's info, website, all of the ways that you can connect with her and find out more and work with her. And, you know, just if all of this is completely new to you, or listening to this and all of this is completely new to you, and you know, it's like, just, yeah, consider homeopathy as an inroad into some really, really, really profound healing for things that you maybe have just been like, oh, I'm stuck with this for the rest of my life and there's nothing I can do. And just you know, it doesn't have any side effects. Am I correct in saying that? Because as
Yes.
far as
Oh,
I know,
yeah.
it doesn't have any side effects.
No, it doesn't have any side effects.
And yeah, so and I've had, you know, where people have kind of, yes it does, it's like, no, I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because that's the whole point with homeopathy. So yeah, so just, you know, consider giving, you know, whether you work with Heather or, you know, just even starting with flower essences, if that's how you want to, you know, just start and see what happens. It really is so beneficial. And then yeah, I feel like we've been going almost an hour. Did you want to add any final things before we close, Heather? Anything that you want to just a vision or anything that you wanted to share that we didn't touch upon?
These are my two favorite topics with one of my favorite philosophers here with you. So it's like, this has just been such a treat to be able to explore all this. And I really think the key is just be curious. For everyone who's just not sure, yes, but I'm more sick than others. Yes, but part of my story is around my illness. Maybe there's identity structures attached to that. There's a fear around letting go of that. That's so common. And I say, let's go gently there together and just be curious about what might be waiting for you on the other side of these incredible healing modalities.
Yeah, and the gentle part is really important to emphasize, I feel, that with homeopathy, because it doesn't have to be this really aggressive way of like, let's get in there, and you know, it's like it's just this gentle, like onion layer unlayering.
Yeah. It's so subtle that, like I said, it often doesn't get credit. People say, I didn't feel anything, but I can tell by looking at them, or their voice sounds different, or their skin is clearer, or they say, I quit my job and I broke up with my boyfriend and I am going to the gym. Like, I'm not making that up. And then I go, okay, the remedy's working. Like, no, I didn't feel anything.
Yeah, because
remedies work.
It's because it's like I've ingested something orally, so I need to feel it in this way. It's like, oh, but it's showing up in your life in these ways that you don't expect. Yeah. Ah, wow. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Rohini.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a part 2 at some point once the next cycle of your vision is out in the world. And yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. And yeah, be sure to check out all Heather's links, and yeah, seek her out. If there's a little part of you that's like, oh, pay attention to that. And yeah, thank you. See you all soon. Bye. Oh, I'm gonna stop recording.